Hi, I will be talking about Russia invading Ukraine. Russia has been a great power for centuries and remains so. It has always has and still has legitimate zones of interest abroad in both the former Soviet lands and elsewhere. We should not drop our guard in this respect, neither should we allow our opinion to be ignored. This is what Putin told the State Duma in his first speech as the Prime Minister back in August 1999. Weeks after the closing ceremonies of the Sochi Olympics, Russia has invaded Crimea, Ukraine. This event has serious impacts on the world and could lead to future conflicts. I am no expert on this current situation, but I found this news very interesting. The actions on Russia could have an impact on us all, and it is important for us to know what is going on in the world. So after researching this topic thoroughly, I'll try to get you up to date and give you a report on the situation. In my informational speech, I'll give you background information on the current events and try to explain what is happening now and possible future conflicts that could arise because of this situation. Here's a map of Ukraine, and as you can see, Crimea is located at the very southern point of Ukraine, and Russia is directly on the east border of it, so it is very close. First point to look at is that Ukraine was actually once part of the Soviet Union, and Ukraine became an independent when the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, so there's very strong ties to Russia throughout Ukraine. Over 30% of the population claims to be Russian. Most of these people live in the eastern portion of the country too. One of the first events to look at is when the former Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko announced he was abandoning an agreement that would strengthen ties with the European Union, and he looked to seek a closer cooperation with Moscow. This led to hundreds of thousands of protesters to take over the city hall in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. President Yanukovych was forced to flee the country, and he is now hiding in Russia. Ukraine was left with angry citizens and many protesters, and they now have the task of electing a new president. With Ukraine left disorganized and confused, Russia had the perfect opportunity to strike. Weeks after the end of the 2014 Sochi Olympics, which is only 300 miles away from Crimea, Russia invaded. From February 28th to March 2nd, Russian soldiers seized key airports, military bases, and coast guards throughout Crimea. There was not too much fighting in Crimea during this time. The soldiers pretty much gave up, and most citizens were celebrating Russia's takeover. Crimea's population has 70% that consider themselves Russian citizens. Obama made a statement, and he said that he made clear that Russia's continued violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity would negatively impact Russia's standing on the international community. According to the president, there will be costs for military intervention in Ukraine. This was all according to Piers Nagin, who is a writer for The Nation of Change and wrote the article Russia Invades Ukraine, published on March 4th, 2014. On March 6th, Crimea's local parliament, which largely supported Yanukovych, who was fleeing into Russia, they voted to join Russia. On March 7th, the House of Foreign Relations Committee called upon Obama to enact financial and trade sanctions against Russia. On March 16th, residents of Crimea were given a choice if they're joining Russia or opting for more autonomy from Ukraine, and they voted overwhelmingly to join Russia. On March 17th, Russian President Vladimir Putin officially recognized Crimea on Monday as a sovereign independent state. The last few points were taken from the article Timeline Key Events in Ukraine, and they were put together by the Associated Press for the USA Today and published on March 13, 2014. Following the current situation, many people are left wondering, why did Russia do this and what are the future implications? Julia Loft, the senior editor of New Republic magazine, writes in her article, Putin's war in Crimea could spread to Eastern Europe, written on March 1st, 2014. Her quote is, Putin invades because he can, and no one can stop him, not the US or the NATO. Other countries don't want to interfere because of the fear of going to war or starting a conflict with Russia. Losing Crimea is very bad for Ukraine. They were long supporters of Russia, but were trying to transition to the pact with the European Union. In Ukraine, they protested and forced the corrupt president out, and it has led to an election of a new president. Putin fears the same uprising and protests happening in Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin's approval ratings have reached a 3-year high following the occupation of Crimea and the Sochi Olympics, quotes Jack Moore, editor of International Business Times, in his article Ukraine Crisis. And this was published on March 13, 2014. Another reason Russia wants Crimea is because of the Ukrainian city of Sevastopol, which is home to Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Some other people have suggested not as logical ideas, but still believable ones, such as Russia is currently hurting economically and they want Ukraine's resources, or that Russia wants to capture Ukraine so it has a clear path to Europe if it ever wanted to declare war. No one seems to know why exactly Russia invaded. This is why the situation becomes so scary and important to be informed on. In my informational speech, I give you background information on the events that occurred in Crimea, Ukraine, and try to explain what happened. Weeks after the closing ceremonies of the Sochi Olympics, Russia has invaded Crimea, Ukraine, and this has serious impacts on the world and could lead to future conflicts down the road.